Hello and welcome to the Power of Brands in the Climate Fight. Today we are joined by a live audience and a live stream audience, so welcome to everybody who's taking part today. This is the first event in an exciting series that sees BBC, ITV, Channel 4, STV and Sky in association with Albert and Natural Capital Partners. And together we'll be exploring the role that TV has to play in raising awareness of climate change. You can find out more if you go to wearealbert.org events, shown on screen. But today we're going to be focusing on the power of television to change perceptions of brands and the environment, and I'll be discussing that with representatives from ITV, Channel 4, Sky and STV. But before I introduce my panel today, I'd just like to invite you all to take part as well by entering your questions on slido.com using the hashtag that you see on screen. There won't, unfortunately, be any subtitles on the live stream event today, but if you'd like to catch up using subtitles, then please go to the catch-up version later. So, now to welcome my expert panel. I have with me today a mixture of both live and virtual panellists. So, first of all, we have Lucy Crotty, who is Cultural Insight and Strategy Lead at ITV Commercial. Now, Lucy has set up a cultural insight proposition for advertisers, which is called ITV Home Planet, and that is a commercial initiative which helps audience to make swaps to more sustainable choices. Then in real life, we have Rebecca Fay, who's from CMO from Natural Capital Partners. Now, Rebecca works really closely with a lot of businesses to communicate their carbon neutrality and their progress towards net zero. I know, Rebecca, you've got a really strong relationship with Sky, so you'll be talking about some of that work today. And then we have Danielle Kelly, who is Director of Strategy and Sales in Scotland for STV. Danielle developed the STV Growth Fund, which supports businesses in the community in Scotland while helping to boost the local economy. And last but not least, Tom Patterson, who had this epic journey yesterday, which he detailed on Twitter.
Quite the pilgrimage.
We're very glad that you made it here.
Thank you.
And Tom is Group Digital Manager at Channel 4 Agency and Client Sales. And you're also Green Earth C4 Project Manager and founder of For Earth at Channel 4.
Yes.
So you're a very, very busy man. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Now, I'm Karen Fraser, and I've just joined IPSOS. We're a global insights company, and we help government and brands understand sustainability better. And one of the things that I've noticed in our research recently is a disconnect between what people think they'll do themselves and what they think that others will do. So about 70% of the people that we spoke to thought that they themselves felt very confident that they could make changes that were necessary to reduce the impact of climate change, but crucially, they don't trust other people to do the same. And I think one of the things that struck me about TV in particular is that it can be used to improve the awareness of others and their actions. What sort of role do you think that television has to play in that? Tom, what do you think?
Well, I mean, yeah, look, as a fan of TV and as a salesman of TV, it has a massive role to play. I still remember the first same-sex kiss on EastEnders many years ago. The very shocking storyline at the time of a teenage pregnancy on Coronation Street. So yeah, for me, TV has the power to normalise things that are probably marginalised. We've done it at Channel 4 with the Paralympics and the Diversity Awards. So yeah, in the battle against climate change, we have a really, really crucial role to play.
Absolutely. And Lucy, hi, we can see you on screen. You are, hello, joining us virtually. Now, I know you're a cultural specialist, so what sort of role do you think television has to play across the entire audience in the United Kingdom?
A pretty big one is what I would say. So TV's got a fabulous way of normalising kind of more of those spiky social issues and pressing issues of our time. So I think when it comes to the climate crisis, it's something that the audience have been so aware of for so long. But it feels really overwhelming, doesn't it? It feels a little bit like, how can I genuinely make a difference at a local level, at an individual level? But what we need people to do is really become, take that ostrich, head in the sand, disengaged, oh God, it's too much, and actually start to positively think about ways that they can go about making little changes that add up to make a really big collective difference. Yeah. And I think when you think about behavioural science, one of the biggest things that we can do is normalise that collective power, normalise that collective action, to your point. So when you see other people do it and you realise actually it's not as inconvenient as you thought, it's not as kind of intellectual as you thought, you can bed it down really easily into your day-to-day.
Yeah, and I've seen research from Yale University that says that when there's more hope, when people have hope, then they're more inclined to take action. Do you think that's something that you recognise in your work? Have you seen that?
Absolutely. We do a lot of research at STV with a company called Scott Pulse, who are the largest online panel in Scotland. And similar to what you were talking about, the connect with what people want. So we found things like 71% of people are more likely to want to buy a product that's fully recyclable. But interestingly, they're more likely to pay more for it. So 39% of people are willing to pay a little bit extra. So there's a real demand out there, and I think that lends to hope that people are trying to do the right thing. They're trying to start somewhere, and from what Lucy said as well, it's about seeing other people doing it and creating that halo effect, and that's what TV is fantastic at. You think about storytelling, you think about have you been affected by what you've seen on screen, some of the examples Tom's mentioned. The reason those messages go up and that support's there is it really resonates with people. The impact on decision making has been recognised by the UN. I know we're all here in Glasgow at COP today, but that is the power that television has to affect change.
Absolutely, yeah. And this is something Sky's been doing for a number of years now, Rebecca. I remember, and I'm old enough to remember, in the mid-2000s, James Murdoch, he made public announcements about Sky's commitment to sustainability, and we've seen that extended throughout the years.
Yeah, I think so. I think they, Sky started off, they've been carbon neutral for more than 10 years now, and started off by looking at their own footprint and what they could do themselves to make sure that they were as efficient and carbon efficient as possible, and then extending that through to a sort of very broad, holistic approach. They're covering their programming around climate change, their campaigning around things like Sky Ocean Rescue and Rainforest Rescue, and then they're sort of unique as a broadcaster because they also have a platform. So they've just launched the world's first carbon neutral television. So they're sort of constantly looking at everything, and I think this one is relevant as well when it comes to brands, is that requirement for authenticity that consumers have, a good monitor now for anyone who's not authentic and credible. And so they, the broadcasters need to be credible as a platform as well as representing an opportunity for brands to talk about their message. And I think Sky has done that by looking at everything, everywhere where they have a footprint and seeing what they can do. And now they're committed to net zero by 2030, so very rapidly, achieving net zero, not waiting to 2050 and so on. So constantly pushing those boundaries.
I mean, I do notice that every single touch point of Sky has a message about sustainability, and thereby reduces the risk, really, because what you do and what you say are matched.
Yeah, that real sort of the walking the talk. Exactly.
And that comes out, actually, we've got a panel of 16 to 24-year-olds called the 4 Youth Panel. Surprising, we've got 4 there. And we found that, to resonate the point, I guess, 75% of them are extremely concerned about the environment. 66% of them don't know what to do about it. And then a massive 80% of those that are extremely concerned want brands to do more and want them to almost guide them on the journey to be able to do more. So you're right, and there is a big bullshit barometer, I think is what we're referring to.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on that because you were talking about that earlier, weren't you? Like, people have a really highly tuned sense of what's real and what's not.
Yeah.
So, Lucy, I'd like to bring you in here because, you know, you're a cultural specialist. What things do you think help to get that message across and do it in a way that people believe?
I think a really valid point's been made that you have to have your own house in order. You know, you've got two different types of communication. You've got your things that you'd like to foreground and that you'd like to talk to consumers about, raise awareness of, etc. And then you've got things in the background. So in our case, from a broadcasting perspective, what you're doing behind the camera to make sure that you've got, you know, really credible proof points of how you are achieving net zero. So similarly at ITV, we're net zero by 2030. We've got 4 different pillars of that to achieve. And we're getting our house in order. So when we were developing Home Planet, which is our kind of like foreground commercial initiative for brands who want to carry sustainability campaigns, the one thing that we honed in on from an insight perspective was that the average person is going to have to cut down their household carbon emissions by 87%, which is huge. You can only imagine how much change that is. Obviously, a lot of that comes from your energy, from driving a petrol diesel car, and your diet as well, eating a bit too much of the red meat. Yeah. So when you start thinking about that massive change required, what we learned into, again, a bit of behavioural science, was that you've got to chunk up that overwhelming problem, and you can give people and hone in on those big kind of changes that they can make that add up to make a huge difference in cutting down their carbon footprint. Yeah. But not using that language, you know, not using emissions, not using footprint, because I think the average person is just like, what does that actually mean? So if you can just give people really positive ways that they can swap to sustainable alternatives, that really helps bring it to life for them.
That's great. And that's what you're doing with the ITV Home Planet. And I know, Danielle, you were telling me earlier that you've been doing some research about Christmas, because obviously that's looming on the horizon. It's going to be a very different Christmas again.
Yeah, absolutely. We work with a lot of SMEs and bigger global brands, but what they all have in common is really wanting to understand what consumers want.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of research, and interestingly, this Christmas, people are planning on using less gift wrapping. So about 18% of people are dropping that. But they're actually increasing the eco-credentials of the gifts they buy. So they're looking for more products that have a green basis. But I agree with what Lucy's saying as well about people aren't quite sure where to start, particularly, you know, in some of those SME spaces. We do growth academies, which are free for SMEs to attend. And it's really about sharing those skills and insights, because people want to make a change, but they're just not quite sure what changed enough, where to start, how to really go on that journey. So I think the two things are really powerful. Being able to, as broadcasters, share those insights with brands can really affect that change, because we know consumers want it, but the power of the collective hopefully can drive towards it together.
Right. I mean, I've been talking to lots of brands over the last year, you know, maybe 20 of the UK's largest advertisers. I was really struck by how much they've changed their plans, partly as a result of COVID, but also in response to the climate crisis. So 76% of all the brands that we polled said that they'd made changes to that, like wide scale changes to strategy, so that they're now focusing on people, profit and planet. So in that environment, what steps do you think brands need to take in order to change and sustain change?
I think, to your point, actually, to walk the talk.
Yeah.
We're very fortunate. We launched something called the Greenhouse Fund a couple of years ago, and it's a £3 million initiative to help SMEs get off the ground, help them you know, develop their adverts or whatever it might be. And we launched that with Tenzing, which is an energy drink, but it's all natural, organic. And in terms of walking the talk, honestly, Tenzing are like the kings of this. So they label the can, so they tell you how much carbon's in it. They are currently carbon negative. They managed, on their second advert, I think, went out on Earth Day, and they could announce that they were carbon negative. Part of the deal we've got with them, which makes our lives a bit easier actually at Channel 4, is they, to your point on people, planet and profit, we've got shared value. They're offsetting the entire full sales team's footprint for a year. And for each member of Channel 4 staff, they're planting 4 trees. So we will have 4,000 trees, which are shared by Channel 4 and Tenzing by the end of the year. So look, yeah, those guys, Tenzing, are really pushing the kind of, I guess, setting the bar very high. I think their profits go back into charitable stuff like clean air. So the more that we can partner as broadcasters commercially in that space, it obviously, again, the halo effect, that commercial prospect resonates with every other brand then, hopefully, to make a change as well.
I love that exchange rate. 1 Channel 4 employee for 4 trees.
Yes, I mean, we don't know if we're getting a good deal, to be honest, but yeah.
I think the other things is for that sort of credibility, and that using certification, using third-party sort of marks and certifications to endorse what you're doing. I think that's quite an important part of it. So, you know, whether it's a science-based target, which, you know, science-based targets are hard to do, and they should be hard, but to really demonstrate that internal reductions are in line with science. For some smaller companies, that the methodologies around an SBT might be too complex, but a science-informed target where you can show that you're going, you know, your internal reductions are driving down to 1.5 degrees. I think those are really important parts of it in terms of that credibility, to have those third-party statements. Sky's carbon neutral certified, they follow a protocol to do that that's not theirs. I think those are quite important parts of a programme to show that authenticity.
Probably the trust that comes with that as well, tapping into television. You know, TV is the most trusted. I think IPSOS and ThinkBox actually did research that showed that, you know, I think 42% for TV and then 5% for social media. So really, really strong on trust. But it goes to that when people see a brand on TV, they know it's been through advertising standards, they know it's legal, truthful, honest. So if brands saying they're fully recyclable, or if they're saying, you know, that we have, I saw Persil recently, which I thought was fantastic, you know, they've changed their cleaning products to more plant-based, and that absolutely has to be factually correct if it's on TV, because it's so highly regulated, and I think it really points to that accreditation being so strong and having to underpin absolutely everything.
Yeah, that's right. Well, what do you think are the challenges in getting the message across? And I'm thinking especially in a younger audience, so perhaps there's something I'd like to bring you in again on, Lucy.
I think when it comes to kind of creatively effective advertising, what we saw as a pattern in like 2019 into the early 20s was that comms was really catastrophizing. It was really fatalistic. It was very doom and gloom. You know, you would see a lot of like shock tactics and see it to believe it, of, you know, look at this plastic installation to bring to life what's happening in the seas, etc. And all of that's really commendable, but my God, is that terrifying for the average person to see. And I think it just led to that ostrich head in the sands that I was talking about earlier, where people just don't engage and the message doesn't cut through. So what I think we're seeing in the industry as a rallying call for in terms of driving creative effectiveness as a whole is the power of humour, the power of humility, the power of fallibility, because let's be honest, none of us are eco-angels. You know, you're making an imprint on the earth just by your sheer existence. So brands included in that. As a kind of stance from an ITV perspective, you know, we're not a regulatory body, although obviously we comply with all the regulations that come through. So we're less in the business of kind of judging brands for the journey so far, and we're much more motivated now to kind of give brands a platform to talk about progression. So when we're talking about progression, we're instantly thinking about the climate crisis more positively, but thinking about the journey already in action, which is really motivating. We're thinking about laying out specific targets and making sure that it's credible. So, you know, driving that authenticity, trusted point of view. But we're also thinking about how to get people, you know, uplifted around this, you know, doom and gloom topic. So humour, like I said, super powerful. drawing like the tropes of your content and your brand. I think as broadcasters, often our brand is often seen in conjunction with the power of our stalwart shows. So, you know, having your tone of voice, all of us work on different brands here. So ours at ITV is about kind of entertaining first to inform and then uplift people's spirits around issues. So, you know, we've done that with Eat Them to Defeat Them, Britain Get Talking, and with our recent campaign for the climate crisis. Yeah. And it does tend to cut through that way. So I think there's a chance to change the tone to appeal to different audiences.
Yeah. Tom, is there anything you'd like to add? Because I know you've been doing work about how to connect with younger audiences and not being patronising in particular.
Yeah, and, you know, that can be difficult. But to kind of Lucy's point on, I guess, not sensationalising and, you know, creating absolute panic. So today is the launch of Clean Up Soaps Week. Hollyoaks, which reaches a ton of 16 to 24-year-olds across Channel 4 and E4, is dedicated its kind of storyline to tackling fast fashion. So again, through humour, there is a store. I don't know if anyone watches Hollyoaks. It's fantastic. You should. There is a store in Chester called Sweater Thunberg, and this is a second-hand clothes store. It's run by a vegan, and we've partnered actually with Vinted, the app where you can sell on clothes and declutter. So it's a great commercial and editorial partnership. But yeah, that's a great way for us to connect with 16 to 24-year-olds, is to normalise that again through the editorial without going, you know, oh God, stop buying, or, you know, oh God, we're all going to die in 10 years. Yeah. It needs to be, look, these are the accessible changes that we can all make, and that actually it's cool to buy second-hand clothes. Again, that's patronising saying cool, but I couldn't think of any other way to put it. Yeah, that's how we're kind of trying to tackle that at the moment.
Yeah. It's those sort of humorous ways that make things more memorable, isn't it? Sweater Thunberg. Yeah. Yeah.
I think the other point about it is that that it can be seen as very much the area and the sort of purview of the large brands. They've got the resources to put in place these big programs. They can then talk about them, they can advertise and so on. I think that those small sort of entrepreneurial companies that, you know, are probably much more appealing to a younger audience, those smaller, more innovative companies, and giving them the opportunity to talk about their message and, you know, what they do, I think is really important. Sky's got their Footprint Fund, which was to give those small brands an opportunity for advertising space. If they want a competition, 5 brands can advertise on Sky, and I think that's a really important part. So it's not just the Unilevers and, you know, and so on that are able to talk about this, that some of those small entrepreneurs can.
Literally everyone's got a role to play, and smaller businesses, entrepreneurs, they've got a huge part to play in this, haven't they? Because it's the innovation that's going to change the way we heat our homes, build things, transport things, that will make the difference. I'll tell you something that took my interest over the weekend, and it might focus the minds of some of the senior people at ITV as well. Apparently, ITV senior execs' targets and bonuses are going to be linked to their success against climate change targets.
That's good.
Yeah. So what do you think about measurement in those terms? How do you go about measuring the success of some of the initiatives that you're involved in?
I think it goes back to accreditation. So we've recently joined the Ad Association Ad Green. Yeah. So not only through projects like Albert, but also through the Ad Association, we make about 200 to 300 ads a year for different brands, mostly SMEs. And actually we're going to be adopting that through our STV creative model, so that even in ad production, that's going to be embraced, so we'll be able to track the difference essentially. That's everything from using single-use plastics on sets through to looking at more efficient ways of travel. And I think the more that we start to do that, the more we see brands doing that. So we've had some really fantastic stories from brands who are in our Green Fund. So one, Edinburgh Boiler Company, talking about heating, they popped into my head, and we've worked with them for a number of years. But they recently joined the Green Fund, and they started as Edinburgh Boiler Company. They've now expanded to Glasgow, Aberdeen, Dundee. They've had great success from their marketing, but what they're doing, similar to what Tom was talking about, they're planting a tree for every boiler they install. So they're offsetting 0.3 tonnes of carbon. It's equivalent of driving 700 miles, which is quite incredible. But they've really been able to grow their business. They've now opened a training academy to train future heating engineers of tomorrow with green credentials. They're packing their vans differently. So all those kind of measurements that people see us starting with as, you know, part of the business community, part of the ecosystem that we all live in, it starts to grow a sort of halo effect, essentially. Pardon the grow pun, but you know, it does start to expand further out, and I think that's where we start to see that measurement really coming into effect, because it's not only your own carbon emissions, you know, similar to panellists here, we are also going to be carbon net zero by 2030, and we've got targets in every single person in the company's KPIs. So in your individual objectives, every single person has a sustainability objective, and the more that you start to, you know, talking about normalise and be authentic, that really has the heart to it, and you see that measurement really growing as a result, I think.
Interesting. And what about the rest of the panel? Are you aware of similar targets in your organisations?
Yeah, I mean, certainly at Channel 4, our wonderful sustainability manager is pushing us quite hard. But also, I think, look, a measure of success, you know, we've all got to commit, like you said, to something. And I think for Channel 4, it's been really important for us to commit to external collaborations. So that's through the Responsible Media Forum or through Ad Net Zero. Because, again, one, you're publicly announcing we're going to do this, so you have to, which is really important. And two, working collaboratively. Channel 4 would be able to do that alone, but obviously everything goes quicker if you've got someone to lean on. You can lend on intel. So, yeah, that would be how we'd be measuring our success.
Lucy, how are you going to be measuring success?
Well, I'm not a bigwig, so I'm not getting financially battered with that decision, although I do think it's really commendable.
Some of the social impact projects you were talking about earlier, they've been hugely successful, like Eat Them to Defeat Them. That made a difference to the sales of vegetables. So these things can really make an impact.
Yeah, they really can. I mean, the social purpose team at ITV is brilliant, and so are the agencies that they work with. So kudos to them. I mean, just to highlight some of the examples. So God knows how this was measured, but Eat Them to Defeat Them ended up selling 217 million extra portions of fruit and vegetables after the campaign. And I think just on that kind of tonal learnings, I think it was quite bold. We hadn't seen something like that come out, and it really resonated with kids because, you know, vegetables are so often the good guys. How boring are vegetables? How dull is fruit? And for kids, you know, they're always told you've got to have your 5 a day, eat that, or help you see in the dark. And, you know, the messages are just going right over their heads. What about when you reframe vegetables and fruit as the bad guys? You know, what kid doesn't want to bite the head off an angry carrot or kind of squelch down into a tomato and have it ooze everywhere? You know, that gets their attention. So it did really, really well. And I think quite a few of the schools that were involved said it was the most successful campaign to increase fruit or veg consumption that they had ever seen. So I think we could take learnings from that and to be a bit bolder. Look, I really like the Wagamama creative that came out with the kind of Godzilla-esque dinosaur that's rampaging through the streets, because, you know, nature is scary. Nature sometimes can fight back in the most vicious of ways. And that's actually when you get a lot of people paying attention, look at stuff that goes viral. So there's lots of different ways, I think, that we can change the narrative in these kind of social purpose-esque campaigns. Another one that we did with Britain Get Talking was really successful. I think it ended up with 6.5 million people after seeing the campaign, spoke to a friend or family member when we were super isolated in lockdown, that was, and, you know, our mental health had just utterly taken a collective battering. we used Ant and Dec particularly, you know, and the power of kind of silence to encourage the nation when they're normally congregating in that kind of like quite like depth of content, zoning out in front of the TV, to go talk to each other, use this time, you know, have a bit of a chinwag. So yeah, I think there's lots of ways that we collectively as TV broadcasters can kind of borrow from the power of our content, and if we can unlock the lessons there and then give that to clients and agencies to further their communications, I think that's, you know, a good role of kind of some of the sales and strategy teams as well.
Yeah, and I think the other thing we should mention is the Ad Green calculator that helps in production, so you can work out the carbon impacts of any production, which has been recently launched. So yeah, a lot of different ways to measure success. There's a lot of people who would say that advertising exists to make people buy things that they don't need and thereby encourages consumption. Would you buy into that? What do you think, Danielle?
I think advertising has a massive power for change. And I think ultimately that's why we're all here today, and that's why we're having these conversations, because the power of that lean back experience and the impact we can have on each other. We work with a brand, Food Hero Scott, who launched during lockdown, and it's about producers, chefs, restaurant owners coming together to really talk about the provenance of food and eating local and eating fresh and why that's important. Now they set out some ambitious engagement targets, and as a result of the activity they ran on STV, they actually hit their full first-year targets within 1 month. They had 25,000 people going to their website. They had over 5,000 people subscribing to their mailing list, people who genuinely care and want to understand provenance, who want to go to their fantastic coffee roasters out in North Berwick, Steampunks, if anyone is leaving Glasgow. And I have to say a few people here nodding that they know it. You know, these are businesses that are thriving and growing every single day. And without that awareness, without that mass reach that advertising and marketing can give you, people aren't going to find out about them. So I think marketing and TV in particular is really part of the solution.
Yeah, it's quickly scales businesses, doesn't it? And, and I read over the weekend that people on our panel actually from Yorkshire TV and NatWest both were saying it's a really good way to reach a lot of people, and it's not as expensive as some might claim.
I think and the other thing is, the brands that are going to thrive and survive are the brands that are looking at what their business model is that enables them to be sustainable as well as sell what they sell, and get that balance. So, one of the Sky Footprint Fund, one of the winners of the ads was OVO Energy, and the ad is entirely about turning off your lights. So it wasn't about buying your energy, it was about using less energy. So I think those brands that are going to be successful are the ones who get that balance right about how they transform, still to do something and to sell a product, but to transform the way they do it and to do it in a much more sustainable, much more aware of their impacts.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. The power of creativity in inspiring people is part of the role of advertising, isn't it? We will be able to improve awareness of all the new ways that we can make consumer choices that are more environmentally friendly. And actually, we're going to talk to a couple of brands in a minute who've done exactly that. But thank you very much to the panel for now. That was great. We're going to be bringing the panel back in to answer the questions later. If you'd like to put some questions to the panel and the brands who will be joining us, don't forget to go to slido.com and put the hashtag #AskBrands. Now, we're going to hear from two brands who've been leading the charge in terms of sustainability, NatWest and Yorkshire Tea. We're going to be joined by, virtually, Ben Newbury, who is marketing lead at Yorkshire Tea, and Margaret Jobling, who is CMO at NatWest Group. And they will magically appear. Otherwise, I'm going to ask the panel to do their best impressions. Here's Marg and Ben. Hi. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Before we have our chat, we're going to have a look at some of the amazing creative that you've both produced in recent months.
Yorkshire Tea are now 100% carbon neutral, so they've asked their artist to reflect this on their boxes.
The cottage got itself some nice solar panels, recycling bins, just popping a few wind turbines in here. Bit much. I think maybe if we just put a carbon neutral logo on the back of the pack. Jobs are good, I think.
How we use our money today can change the world of tomorrow.
Because money has the power to create a greener planet.
Or to make things even worse. At NatWest, we know we haven't always got it right. And while we've made some progress, our planet is telling us we've not done enough.
It's time for us to do more and do it quicker to help our customers.
That's why we've changed our policy on the companies we lend to.
Why, as a group, we'll provide £100 billion in climate and sustainable finance by 2025.
Why we're supporting greener homes and greener living for our customers.
Because how we use money today makes all the difference.
And we want that difference to be a better world.
For everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you for those. And Marg, can you start by telling us the transition that your brand has made? I know you were telling me earlier that you've got multiple different stakeholders and you have to think about them in different terms.
So for me, it starts with purpose, if I'm honest. So we have a very clear purpose at NatWest Group around championing potential of people, family and businesses. And a core part of that is to deliver sustainability and make sure we have a sustainable future. And it comes in multiple pieces. So one is obviously get your own house in order. I know the panel just talked a bit about that, but we're already net zero and we want to be climate positive by 2025. And then the other big piece is how do we help our customers transition? We're a pretty large church. We've got 90 million customers. So we've got everything from the big corporates who clearly will have a plan and a transition plan to get to net zero, through to small businesses. We're the number one commercial bank in the UK. So we need to really think about our small business and how we help them transition, through to the man/woman on the street. And I think what we've seen is you need to be really quite segmented because those audiences are fundamentally different. So we have everything in our main estate from what I call eco warriors, super savvy, understand everything about climate, net zero, through to people who are active rejectors. So our job as a brand is to help customers on their journey by giving them the right tools, products, services, expertise to really help drive that behaviour change.
Yeah, because I know in your ad, you've got reference to greener mortgages, which are sort of products that can help consumers. Can you tell us a bit more about those?
I guess all the work we've done says, customers generally want to do the right thing. They just don't know necessarily how. And, from a customer perspective, we go, what's the benefit? My whole time I've researched anything eco, it's said, help me save money, help me make it easier, make it, save money, time, money and hassle. So I guess our green mortgages are around how do we drive the right behaviour? So incentivise customers with energy efficient homes, give them preferential interest rates, so to make it as easy as possible. So large focus in the business around how do we create products and services that really piggyback on what customers are doing already, but help them make the right choice that just nudges them into a greener future.
And that can act as quite a strong incentive because obviously for some people, there's a cost implied in making greener choices. So if you can communicate to people they can save money and make a better choice for the planet, then it's an easier sell.
Yeah, exactly. It takes away the barrier for choice, I think, and getting people on their journey. So that's been a key part of how do we make it as simple and as easy as possible. And if you can plumb into an existing behaviour, then again, it's a very easy step for customers to make that choice.
Damn straight. So now I'm going to turn to Ben, and I've got a really important question to start off with, Ben. Have you got a brew?
Have I got a broom? I've let myself down. No. I've had my fill. I normally have quite a few in the morning, so I've had 5 or 6 already, so not to worry.
Well, one of the things that I most loved about your commercial was the involvement that you experienced as you're watching it, as that artist is telling the story. Can you tell us a bit more about how that commercial came about?
Yeah, it's really an interesting story for us because as a brand, we're not really outwardly a really ethical and sustainably focused brand. We're all about properness and having a laugh and being upbeat and good quality tea. And I think what that advert is starting to be a little bit of a response from us to hearing that consumers want to know a little bit more, and that we've got a really great history and story that we can actually tell them. We've been running sustainability initiatives for years since starting as a brand, and because the family that owns us are particularly interested in it. And the initiatives that we run are really all about making sure that we've got the right quality of tea that we buy, and that they're around for the future, and for our farmers, that they've got an income. I guess the video there was really about carbon neutrality, which is achieved through work that we've done in around the world, planting trees, helping farmers to have a livelihood in the future that might not just be from the tea that we will buy, but from other trees that they could plant that might be a crop, but also that have environmental benefits. So that's how we've achieved carbon neutrality. But the challenge for us was how on earth do we explain that to consumers who just want a cup of tea? And they really don't, and sadly, they really don't care that much. So we have to approach it, and we're learning as we go to do it without losing sense of who our brand is. So hopefully through having Andrew, who is the artist who designed our pack, we're able to be ourselves, be authentic and quite genuine. Have some humour, to Lucy's point. Like we're never going to stop being funny and laughing at ourselves, and have some humility. But hopefully that for us is the success of raising a point to most of our drinkers. They'll hear it more if it's very much in our world, rather than if we said it in a really straight and different way.
Yeah, I think that's your story is a brilliant example how you are doing all the right things. And if I'm right, you started doing them before you started telling people about them.
Yeah, I mean,
you planted 5 trees.
Yeah, we started planting. Jonathan Wilder, our founder, started planting trees in the 1990s. His kids got really upset watching Blue Peter one day and saw the deforestation of the Amazon. And from the next day, he started planting trees. So we've had a history that's always been there about how important they are to the planet and to us, and important to our tea farmers and coffee farmers, because we buy coffee too.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you both very, very much. I hope you'll stay with us for the questions in a few minutes. But we are talking about television today, and so we'd have to have a commercial break. And so we're going to hear from Stephen Woodford, who's CEO of the Advertising Association, about Ad Net Zero Summit, which is happening later this week in Glasgow.
Thanks, Karen, and thanks to all the broadcasters for the opportunity to talk about Ad Net Zero and our global summit here in Glasgow this Wednesday and Thursday. It's free, it's going to be streamed online, and so far over 1,500 people from all around the world are joining us. You can register for this at the Advertising Association website. Ad Net Zero is the UK advertising industry's programme to achieve net zero emissions for advertising operations by 2030. All the commercial broadcasters are supporting this, and thanks to them and the 70 or so other businesses who've joined the programme, who are a mix of media owners, tech platforms, production companies and advertising agencies, including all the large agency holding companies, we've got the scale and we've got the corporate commitment to make this challenging objective a reality. And also with thanks to the broadcasters and to BAFTA, we've been able to repurpose the Albert platform for advertising production, creating AdGreen, which went live last month. This will allow agencies, advertisers and production companies to do in advertising what has been done for years in UK broadcast production, and that is to measure and reduce the carbon emissions generated by production, one of the largest contributors to advertising's carbon footprint. Now, our two-day summit will have speakers from all over the world, leaders from the UK, people like Mark Reed from WPP, Nicola Mendelsohn, now global in Facebook, Simon Pitts from STV, and Debbie Klein from Sky. Day one is going to be focused on how we drive the system change needed in the advertising, media and marketing ecosystem to become truly sustainable, and day two will be about the more practical steps we need to take as embodied in the AdNet Zero programme. So please come and join us and find out how you can be part of the change we all want to see in the advertising industry. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Stephen, and hope as many of you as possible can take part in the AdNet Zero Summit later this week. Now it's question time, and we're rejoined by Marg and Ben and Lucy for this. So questions to all the panel and the brand representatives. First of all, are the brands seeing that there's pressure from the public to do even more? So we've heard how much you're doing already, but are you getting any feedback from customers that they want you to go even quicker or do even more? Marg, would you like to start?
No, if I'm honest, I mean, obviously the big corporates are all on a mission to get to net zero. Smaller businesses, I think, really looking for help and really need people and brands and public sector actually to help educate and fund the change. And then I think, as I said earlier, retail customers, which is a big part of our base, vast majority of our customers are looking for help and support, but they're not pushing hard on us. I think we're leading, and I think brands have got a massive responsibility actually to lead the change and make sure the products and services and what we offer are actually fit for future.
Thank you.
But not a big customer push.
No. Ben?
Not from a carbon neutrality net zero point do we have really very much conversation. When we launched that advert of ours on social media, which is where you get most of your direct feedback, it was just like, oh, this is good to know. I think where we do get a little bit more challenges is where it's closer to home. So it becomes about what things can I do, so they're looking at the products more. So we get a little bit more challenge on the packaging and the materials, the things that they're more conscious about, which is their individual impact. And rightly so, so we get a lot more interaction with that these days.
Thank you. If anything, what do the broadcasters think has stopped them from moving faster than they already have? Or don't you think that anything has?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think it's necessarily anything has stopped us per se. I think it's about, and we've talked a lot about honesty today and about being authentic. I think it's about reflecting where we are and where we want to be. So we've done a lot of work. We've got a lot of bespoke programming on just now, Don't Waste Scotland, with our much loved meteorologist Sean Batty. And it's tapping into pretty much what everyone said today. It's about showing really accessible ways. So Sean's out meeting just normal people across the country, so people who are going out on paddle boards and picking up litter from rivers before it hits the ocean, or talking about meeting a family who are teaching their kids how to compost and actually really understand where do strawberries come from. Most of us remember a time when you couldn't get strawberries all year round, and it's that sort of having the conversations. I don't necessarily think there's anything stopping us. It's about tapping into what people want. And I think that's where broadcasters are really well placed to understand the mood of the nation. I know Lucy spoke about, Britain Get Talking, whether it's Clap for Carers, whether it's amazing work that Channel 4 have done with the Paralympics. When people start to see it, it starts to become part of real life. And I think that's where we need to get to next almost.
Yeah. Tom, anything?
Well, yeah, I mean, speaking candidly, at Channel 4, I guess the barrier was we're not experts at this, and, in-house, we're not perfect at this, so should we be talking about it? So that was the barrier, and it's taken a lot of insight, and we formed For Earth, so this is an employee rep group that I'm on, to kind of, I guess, push internally for us to do more. So yeah, maybe customers aren't asking, but certainly as kind of stakeholders within the channel, we want to push for Channel 4 to do more. And the business has responded really positively. So yeah, the challenge, I guess, for anyone is, God, we're not great at this, so should we be talking about it? Because again, customers and viewers and citizens will see that you're not doing it properly. But I think what's really helped is we've kind of drawn a line in the sand and said, yes, we're not doing this perfectly, but what we are going to do is try to be as perfect as we can. And I think, again, to your point on authenticity and transparency, if you say, yeah, we're not great, but we're doing everything we can, and can you help us as viewers and staff members, that really pushes things forward.
Yeah. There's a question here for Yorkshire Tea and NatWest. How have you found working with broadcasters on conveying green messages? Are they active partners in amplifying your message, or could they contribute more to you? Marg, what would you like to say about that?
Well, we've signed up for AdNet Zero, and actually, ironically, I would say the broadcasters are all signed up and all active. It's the brands that haven't. We're pushing much harder on. So I found the broadcasters great partners, and the bit I would definitely say is no one can do this alone. So partnership is going to be absolutely critical. So we're working with Facebook, we're working with Google, working with Microsoft, working with ITV to fund small business advertising, which is our latest campaign for small businesses. So I would say the broadcasters actually are very engaged and really taking it incredibly seriously. I think we've got a lot of work to do as a collective to drive a better outcome for all. To be honest, I don't think anyone can do this alone.
And how about you, Ben?
Well, not really much more to add to that. I'd say that it's because of it's relatively new, this focus for us as a brand. We've got things that we'll continue to learn and develop, and conversations that we would continue to have with broadcasters. I think the challenge is one of reaching the right audience with them. So it's really trying to understand how best to do that, within which programming, and how you can be more targeted when there's potential for a lot of waste within TV, depending on who you need to speak to. So I think it's really is one of future partnership and understanding to make things better.
Thanks. Another question, is there a tension between advertising products and therefore stimulating more consumption and tackling climate change? Rebecca, how about you?
Well, I think we sort of talked about this before, that I think inevitably there is, if businesses don't transform and don't start to manufacture their products differently, or change their business models. So, you know, looking at how pensions are invested, or looking at how tea has grown. I mean, Yorkshire Tea, one of the things they're doing is, you know, their program, their carbon neutral program, includes tree planting around smallholder tea farmers in Kenya, which is important for the resilience of those tea farmers in order to grow a good quality tea. Yeah. So I think if a business isn't willing to rethink its business model, then there's a conflict. But I think the leading businesses are rethinking their business models to avoid that conflict.
Yeah. Anyone else comment on that?
Yeah, no, I agree completely, and we've seen that, you know, right across the board, whether it's making small changes like packing your trucks more efficiently, but it all requires you to think a little bit differently and actually to change, and that's hard as humans. You know, we've been talking a lot about, you know, office versus work from home and how that's going. It's another change, isn't it? So none of us thought we could have worked from home full time, but we all did it, you know, and we're all still here, and people thrive during that, but it requires you to stop and think a little more. And I think we're at that point where everyone is willing to do that. And I think we've heard from everyone today that by and large, people are looking for guidance, they want to really be better informed. And I think that's when we start to see those changes becoming realities, because the willingness is there, the hope is there, and now people are stopping and, as Rebecca says, going, right, how do I actually change some of this infrastructure to make things better and make it sustainable for the long term. You know, we've worked with businesses that we've worked with since we launched in 1957, we still work with today, and that's very much our ethos, is how do we work with someone for 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years, but that requires us all just to work slightly differently to achieve that.
Yeah, so it's a long-term kind of transformational approach that we need to do in partnership. There's a great question here. So, how do we get across the actual urgency of the crisis in a positive message? What a challenge. And we've heard from everybody today the importance of, you know, humour and positive messages in order to provoke change. But how do you do that and then get across how urgent this is? Is there anyone that'd like to come on that? Lucy?
Ooh, that's a question. Again, language. So we have ITV Climate Action Week running this week. And the clue's in the title, it's action-led. So I think the narrative has shifted quite a lot from kind of bringing, you know, the doom and gloom, the data, the science behind kind of making an argument that the climate crisis was real, really, to now, okay, it's real, it's happening, you know, under 12 years to save the planet. COP26 is a massive part of that realisation, I think. And then we must continue to contribute to that positive language. So that's why, you know, for us, we're committed around focusing people's attentions on the home and their surroundings, because it's almost like a checklist. Like, these are the behaviours that will add up to make the biggest difference. You know, swap to do that, swap to do this, because then it's a literal kind of like, okay, I've done this and this. If I can get to my 10, maybe I'll get a little bonus point and £100 off on my next renewable energy tariff renewal. And I think on the part of probably of all broadcasters, it's through continuing that authentic dialogue in our content. So, you know, COP26 is a huge moment in time. It's not the marker in time. We need to continually nudge, you know, use humour, use these stalwart shows, use our talent, use our presenters, and just weave it in. I think the theme for me is stealthy sustainability. So use your brand, use your content as like a Trojan horse in culture, and stealth sustainability into it to really embed it.
The broadcasters are doing this week, aren't they? So, you know, all news, factual soaps, they're all having messages within them and takeovers that will get that message across quickly. That's brilliant. So we talked a lot about creativity and humour. Let's have a quick fire round at the end. Which are our favourite ads in terms of getting the message across in a creative and humorous way? Yorkshire tea,
well,
come on people.
Mine is Yorkshire tea, I have to admit. So I saw the Yorkshire tea ad for quite some time ago now, and I love it. And I see a lot, you know, with a lot of our clients, I see a lot of videos around what they're doing around climate change and carbon neutrality and net zero. And I have to say Yorkshire tea is the best I have ever seen in more than 12 years of looking at these things. So I think, top marks for me.
I agree. I love corn, and I also think Oatly have done a great job of moving things along, you know, for a mass audience as well. And everyone should advertise on TV. So a huge thank you to everybody, to Marg, to Ben, to Lucy, to Danielle, to Tom and to Rebecca, and of course to all of you on the live stream and in the room today. We are thrilled that you could join us, and we hope that you can join us throughout the week. The next session is tomorrow afternoon, when we will have reporting from the front line, stories of climate change from the journalists who have witnessed them firsthand, and that's in the Green Zone at 4:30. But that's it for our session today. We're absolutely thrilled to have had you join us, and thank you for joining us today.